Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For your first time comers here, my name is Sipiwo. In this channel, I cover everything design and development related in order to assist you to become the better designer or developer that you inspire to be. If that sounds like something that you can get behind, I highly encourage you to go ahead and click the subscribe button. Click the bell button so to get notified every time I publish a new video. And if you like this type of content, go ahead and smash that like button. The YouTube algorithm likes that for some weird reason. If you have done all of that, we are ready to get started with today's video. I am currently doing a series on Frontend Mentor. For you guys who don't know what Frontend Mentor is, it's a website that challenges us designers and developers to sharpen their eye for design. So you're looking at stuff like typography, layout, font, white space, and how to combine all of those elements in order to get the look and feel that you want for your application or even component. And as you guys can see, today we'll be trying to knock out this look of this packages component we see here in front of us. We'll try to get that font, the color, the layout, everything going as is, but we're going to implement this drag element over here that increases or decreases the amount that the client has selected. And you have the option to click a toggle button that's either opt in for monthly billing or yearly billing with a 25% discount. I'm excited to get started with this one. If you are too, go ahead and open up your editor of choice. I'm using Visual Studio Code. Create your React app by running npx create React app, call it whatever you want to call it. Once that is done, we're going to take a look at installing Tailwind CSS because that's what we're going to use to knock out this look. Let's go ahead and install Tailwind CSS with our application. You can quickly Google this, just Google Tailwind CSS with React and it will show you this page. It should be the first link in Google results. And let's follow the step by step over here. I've already gone ahead and run this npx install over here. I suggest you guys go ahead and do that. Once that has installed, we need to install Krago, if that is the right pronunciation of it. So just run npx install Krago. And once we have done that, we need to edit our package.json file. And I'm about this step in my project as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do this with you guys. I'm just going to hit Control B over here to open up my sidebar. I'm going to click on my package.json file. And it informs us that we need to change the start, the build, and also the test instead of using React script to use the Krago one. So let's go ahead and make those changes. Just going to hit Control B again to close my tab. And I'm going to go ahead and press Alt in order to select actually all three. And I can go ahead and edit them all three at the same time. So I'm going to say Krago. And that is what we have currently down here. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And once that is saved, it informs us that next what we need to do is create this config file. So let's go ahead and do that as well. I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it Krago.config. Seems like I can't spell config.js. Enter, and let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to say module.export equal to an object, and inside of this object we're going to have the style, and inside style we're going to have post CSS. So if you guys are wondering why we need to use this Krago, you can go ahead and read the documentation right here on top. Just to go off topic, by clicking that link, it tells you exactly why we are using Krago with Tailwind CSS. I'm just closing that sidebar over there. We have post CSS. Next thing we need to do is create plugins. So I'm going to say plugins is going to be an array, and inside of this array I'm going to require these two files, which is going to be Tailwind.css, and the second one that I'm going to require is going to be auto prefix. Now that I have those two, I can go ahead and save this. Once it's saved, I can actually close them. I'm not going to be in that file anymore, edit that file anymore. I'm going to scroll down. Let's look at the next step. So the next step, it says create your configuration file, which is the tailwind.config.js file. Let's go ahead and create that one. I just need to run it through my terminal. So let's go ahead and open up my terminal. Close my sidebar over there. So in my terminal, I can run npx. It says tailwind init. So Tailwind CSS initiate, and I'm going to run that. Just gonna wait for a couple of seconds. Let's do Control B. Okay, it created that file for me. It's right over there. And Control B to close it. Let's just make sure it's the same. We have that file, module export, purge, dark mode, etc. We have that all going over there. And we can take a look at the configuration documentation down here, where we can extend actually the variables to add our own CSS, add our own font sizes, etc. But we're not going to be doing that. Let's go down and take a look at configure Tailwind to remove unused styles in production. I'm not going to go ahead and publish this application, so I can actually go ahead and just skip this step. And next thing it's saying include Tailwind in your CSS. So let's go ahead and do that. So I can close this config file. I'm going to hit Control B. I can close my terminal so that I have more space to work with. And inside of my source directory, I can go ahead and see what I usually do is when I create a new application, just delete files that I'm not going to use. So let's quickly do that. App.css I'm not going to use. App test, logo SVG, report web vitals, setup test. Those are the files that I'm not going to use. So I'm just going to delete all of those. And then inside my index.css right there, let's include those files over here that Tailwind asks us to include. I can just go ahead and remove all of these. Should be fine. I'm just going to save that. And if I start this application now, it should give me an error. But we have done everything that Tailwind asks us actually to do. So let's just make some couple of changes here in order for us to run this application to see something. In my index.js file, I can go ahead and remove this report web vitals, because that file doesn't exist anymore. And I'm going to go ahead and clear all of that. I'm going to save it. I'm going to close it. In my app.js file, I can go ahead and just remove both of these imports as we don't use it anymore. And in here, I can remove all of this and just change that maybe to say container. And inside here, just to make sure everything is running, say h1. This is fine. So I'm just going to click on save. Control B to close my sidebar, and I'm going to open up my terminal so I can go ahead and say yarn start. You can go ahead and say npm start. It's going to start the Grago starting package over there. And what I'm going to do right now is just pause the video, because my first build, it is going to take a while to do, and I don't want you guys sitting through that. So I'm going to pause the video and I'll be back. Okay, so that has completed. Let me just quickly increase this so that I have more space to work with over here, and I hope you guys can still see this clearly. So what Tailwind CSS allows us to do is the following. If we have a CSS class, let's say we have this property called main, and I wanted to run the full width of the screen, so I would do width, and I'll go say 100%, and I will do the height, and I will go and say 100 view height, correct? And this will fill this entire screen over here. So what Tailwind allows us to do is actually access this CSS properties, what classes that they have predefined. So let's quickly have a look at that. So what I'm going to do over here, I'm just going to change this to a class that I have added. And I'm going to say I want this to be display flex. So I can just add the flex class over there. So this is going to make this container a flex container, display flex. And I want the items in here to be columns and not rows, and I'm going to add that flex call to be columns. And I'm going to add, what I wanted to do is actually to go ahead and fill up this entire screen like the full width. So I can say width screen, which is going to be 100%, and I can say height, same thing, screen, so h for height, and screen is going to be 100 vh. Now I want you to align my items center, so I can say items center. I want you to justify my content also center, so I can go ahead and justify center. Now that I've done that, let's add a little bit of padding. So I'm going to say padding on the x-axis, I'm going to add 20 to it. Let's click on save, and as you can see, this is fine text. It's now centered perfectly on the horizontal and vertical axis, and that's just by adding this couple of CSS classes over here without having to go write any CSS. Cool? I think so too. Let's continue with the design of this website. sorry, of this component. So I think I can actually just remove this h1 as I'm not going to use it. Let's add a new div. So I'm also going to do the same inside of this div. I'm going to call this header container, and I'm going to add the container class to it. And what I'm going to do is add a margin bottom of 16, and I'm going to say text. I want this text to be aligned center. Okay. Okay, so I'm typing everything actually outside of this div. Let's say class name is equal to quotation marks, and let's close this. I wondered why this wasn't green. Let's close it, and then inside of this div I'm going to add an h3, and inside of that h3 I'm going to have that simple traffic dash based pricing. Okay, and I'm going to add some classes to this as well. So I'm going to say class name is equal to the following. So my h3 is just going to have a text dash, which is going to be the font size of this text. I want it to be 3 extra large, and let's do a margin bottom of 4. And I'm going to add a p tag just right below this before we actually save to see the changes. So in my p tag is going to be that sign up for our 30 days 30-day trial. Let's say no credit card required, full stop. And let's add a class to this p tag as well. So I'm going to say class name is equal to the following. So what I want is this text color. So I'm going to say text. I'm going to give it a color of gray, and it's going to be 700. And I'm going to click on save, and let's view this quickly. And as you guys can see, I can actually close this tab. Let's look at this. So we've started up there. Let me just drag this a little bit to the side. So we're going for this look, simple traffic based pricing, and that's what we have right on top. Removing the full stop because they don't have a full stop. Sign up for our 30-day trial, no credit card required, and that's what we currently have. So their gray are actually much lighter than ours, so we can actually decrease this and make this, let's say 500. If we save it, there we go, it's a bit lighter. Maybe do 400 and save it. Let's see. Yeah, I'll definitely go with 500. 500 is still readable. Okay, so next what we're going to do, let's take a look at creating this card section. So we've created that header section. Let's create the card section next. So just outside of this div, I'm going to create a new div, and let's do class name. So you guys are going to see me do a lot of classes, as because we are using Tailwind CSS, and this is basically all that Tailwind CSS is. Just a lot of classes already compiled for you in order for you to just do the styling that you want added. So I highly recommend going ahead and checking out the docs in order to familiarize yourself with what classes will actually do what styling. Like BG stands for background, and that's the color of the background. Rounded will obviously be the border radius, and just add a rounded border to it. Container, as we all know with Bootstrap, what container is the width of how big or how small you want that current div to be. And we're adding a shadow over here, so you have your shadow large, shadow normal, shadow small, and that will just create like a shadow effect to that. So inside of this div, I'm going to add another div tag. That is not a div, that's a dice or something like that. Let's add a div tag, and inside of this div tag, let's add a class name, and I'm just gonna call this one, call it main, so that I know exactly what I'm busy with. So I'm gonna add a padding on a 12 aces of 12, and I'm going to add a padding on the y-axis of 8. And then inside of this div, I'm going to add a new one. So I'm going to say class name is equal to flex. It's going to be a container, and I'm going to add the margin bottom of 8. And let's go ahead inside of this div. I'm going to go ahead and add a p tag, and inside of my p tag I'm going to have 100k page views, and this 100k page views is going to have a class. So everything is going to have a class. Let's say uppercase. I want this text to be uppercase, and my font here I want it to be bold, and also what I want is the text color to be gray. So I'm going to say text gray 400, because it's bold. It's going to look much darker than this one, which is not bold, so that's why I'm making a lighter gray. And I'm going to say text size, which I actually just going to say text must be small. It's going to be display flex, so it's going to fall in flex 1. So there's going to be a flex 1 of this flex container right here on top. And I'm going to add a margin on the y-axis of auto. Save this, and as you guys can see, that 400 actually looks more or less the same as this 500 gray, because that is bold, and that's why I actually made it 400. You can actually decrease that gray, make it 300. Nope, much lighter, 400. So what these numbers are is actually the opacity of that gray. So the less the number are, the lighter it gets. The more the number it is, the more the opacity. Okay, so if this is actually 4, then it's 0.4 opacity of this gray text color. So we have that according to our design. Next, what we need to do is have this section on this side, and you guys will see exactly why I have this margin on the y-axis of auto. The moment it will make no sense at all is why I have that there, but just give me a second, it will make sense in a while. So let's create a div. So as I've said, with Frontend Elementor, we are sharpening our eye for design, our layout, typography, and this is basically it. This is just styling an application in order to see if we can duplicate what was given to us, to identify why the designer did it like that in the first place, and how we can actually go ahead and better the design if it's something that we want to do. So let's do justify end, and in my h3 what I'm going to have is the price. So for now I'm just going to hard code that price of 16.00. Let me add the h3's class also. So class name, that's going to be text, which is just going to be the size of this, going to be 4XL, and just below it I'm going to have a p tag, and inside of this p tag I'm just gonna have / for now I'm just gonna have monthly. Add each class. So this is gonna be a text extra small, which is the XS extra small, and I'm gonna give this text color of gray 600, and a padding all around of 1, and also margin on the y-axis of auto. So let's save that, and as you guys can see, we have that over there. If I quickly remove those two margins over here, you would see what happens. So they jump straight to the top. So for now what we currently have is we have this height because of this h3, but they are aligned to the top, and we do not want that. What we want them to be is exactly in the middle of this height, and that's why we have that margin on the y-axis auto, and that looks much neater than having it right on top. So now we have that look over there, our 100k page views, and we have our $16 per month Okay, we just have a space there. Let me add that space. $16 per month. So the next thing we need to do now is add this slider over here. And how we're going to go ahead and do that, this slider is actually a component that we're going to install. So let's go ahead and install that component. So I'm going to go down here in my terminal. I'm just going to go create a new terminal. I'm going to actually have to stop this one before it runs. So let me just stop that one. Say yes. Let me just clear all of this. And we're going to do npm install -- save, and this is called, I think it's called react input range. And over here you guys can see how you can use it in your component, but you would see exactly how I'm going to use in my component, as I'm going to create a file, or actually its own component, and I'm going to use it there. I'm going to pull it into my app.js file. So while that is running, let me go ahead and do that. Let me just make this a bit smaller. I don't need that entire space, just to see an installation. And I'm going to go ahead and close that, go back to my app. Here's my app, and we just did this monthly p tag over there. So the next thing that we need to do is prepare a room for that input slider, which would go right over here. So I'm going to say -- let's say input slider goes here. Let's comment that out so we know that the input slider goes over there. And then let's create the following. So I'm going to go ahead and create another div right below that input slider, and I'm giving the class name, and this one's going to have a margin top of 8 and also a display of flags. And inside of this one I'm going to have some small tags, and inside of my small tags I'm going to have monthly billing. Guys, so we are actually doing this part right here at the bottom, monthly billing, and then below monthly billing we're actually going to have the toggle button over here. So for now I'm just going to add an input of type checkbox, and then just below that input of type checkbox are going to change that out also with a component that I've gotten online, but I'm just going to copy and paste that entire code inside of that component file and the CSS file, because that actually can get a bit complicated, which is above the scope of this tutorial. But you guys can go ahead and take a look at the code, and if you have any question, hit me up in the comments. I'll be more than happy to assist you. So this is yearly billing, and inside of yearly billing I'm also going to have another small tag, and this small tag is going to be my 25% discount. So I'm going to say 25% discount, and let me add my classes over here. So inside of my monthly class name, I'm going to add the following. It's going to be flex1. My text is going to be super small, extra small. My text color, it's going to be gray, 600. And my text is going to align right. The text align is going to be right. My padding on my right side is going to be 2, and my padding on the y-axis is going to be 1. In my yearly one, I'm going to add a class name, and let's add some CSS to it. So I'm going to say flex1. Text is going to be extra small. Color text dash gray, sorry about that, gray 600, and also padding on the y-axis of 1. And then inside of my 25% discount, I'm going to add a class name. So my 25% discount is going to be a text of extra small, background color, I called it orange, and it's going to have rounded corners or full. So this is going to be rounded corners of just 99%. Depending on the padding, that's what's going to shape that badge, basically that 25% discount badge. So I'm also going to have text color, it's going to be orange dark, padding on the y-axis of 1, padding on the x-axis of 2, margin left 1. Let's go ahead and save this and let's see what we currently have so far. Okay, because that won't work, yarn start, and it's going to boot up my development server again so that we can see the changes that we have done right there with the billing. And I think we can continue with the design if I'm not mistaken. Over here, what I'm going to do is just add a horizontal rule, which is an HR, and we're going to create like the footer part of this design, which is this section. So this HR over here is going to create that line. I'm not sure if you guys can see it. There's like a thin line running through over there. It's going to be this guy. Okay, so let's go ahead and just close this one. Now as you guys can see, we have our monthly billing. That toggle button is going to come over there, our yearly billing, and our 25% discount badge. Starting to take shape. So let's continue with this one. So we're going to have a div, and let's add some classes to this div. So let's go ahead and create a flex. Firstly, I want to call this footer so I know where I'm at. Flex. So padding on the x-axis of 12, padding on the y-axis of 8. And then inside of this one, we're going to create an unordered list. And I'm going to give my unordered list a class name. So this class name just going to be text gray 600, and this text size is going to be extra small with a flex of 1. And I'm going to create my list item. I'm going to duplicate this down by hitting just shift and alt and the down arrow, and I'm able to create another element. Okay, there's actually 3 of them, should have just left the third one. So inside of this list item, let's do unlimited website. So this is just the content from here, unlimited website. The second one is going to be 100% data ownership, and the last one is going to be email reports. And let's add some styling to this too, just for spacing purposes. So I'm going to say class name is equal to margin bottom of 2. Now we have margin bottom of 2. And the last thing that we need to do, just below our unordered list, let's add a button to this, and it's going to be the start my trial button. So let me go ahead and say start my trial, and let's add some classes to style the start my trial button. So class name is going to be btn-dark, and it's going to have rounded full corners as well. So I'm just going to add a padding on the x-axis of 7. I'm going to add a padding on the y-axis of 2. And then my margin on my y-axis is going to be auto. And my text size is going to be extra small. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. Let's view our application. As you guys can see, my button don't look so great. It's because I messed up my padding over there. Let me save it. That looks much better. And if you guys want to see why I have this margin on the y-axis auto, is because my button intends to fill up this full height that this list order over here provide. So I don't want that. What I do want that button to say nope, don't have to fill up that entire height, just the padding that I've given you. So that's our button over there. Text a bit bigger. I think that looks much better. much better. And as you guys can see, our component is already taking shape just by adding all of those classes. We haven't really touched our CSS file for any custom CSS added to this design. We have just used Tail CSS. So if you're comfortable with all the classes and know them by name and know exactly what they would do, you guys can knock out the design while you're busy developing that component like I am. So at the moment I'm busy doing the layout of the component, the look and feel of this component, while also going to work on the functionality of this component. So the next thing that I want to do is just change out some hard-coded values with some functional components or functional values that actually will do something when we trigger them. So the first thing that I want to go ahead and do is just to go ahead and set my price. So over here right on top, if I'm going to go ahead and say const, call this price and say set price, it's going to be equal to use state, and it's going to import my use state for me over there. Automatically I'm going to set this to 20, so that's going to be my use state. So I can go ahead and copy that and use my use state right over here. So I'm going to take away the hard-coded 16 and I'm going to just use that variable over there. So let's say save, and we have our 20 over there. So whenever this price update using the set price function, it's going to update it inside of here because that's what we want. And then secondly, what we need to think of is also this monthly in billing. So we need to set some type of boolean to know, is it doing a monthly one or is it doing a yearly one? So let's go ahead and do that. So I can say const, I'm gonna say yearly for yearly billing. So set yearly, it's gonna be a function, and say use state, and I'm just gonna set this to false because on default he opted in just for monthly and not yearly. So let's go ahead and do the following. So the next thing that I want to do is just to add that to change this monthly also over here. So if you've selected yearly for your billing, this must also change to yearly. So that we can do by going over here in this p tag that we currently over here and do a small if statement here by saying yearly. So it's going to be an if statement. If this is yearly, that's the following, just add a / per year, else it's going to be / per month. Okay, let's save that. Let's see. So it's still saying per month. So if I go ahead and change this to true right here on top, save that, now it's gonna update and say $20 per year. Nice, right? So we're taking a look at all of those small stuff because that's actually something you can really miss in an application. It might seem not that important, but what if a user picks up on it and say no, but I opt in for $20 per year, and it needed actually to change to be $20 per month. So that is something to consider when it comes to UX design. So let's change this back to false. And I think the next thing that we need to do now is go create our input range slider in our component, and then we can come back to this component over here to create our update function that will go ahead and update this price depending on this tick box over here. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on B. I'm going to go to my files in my source directory. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this components. And then inside of my components, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this file InputRange.js. So InputRange.js. The first thing that I'm going to do, I'm just going to import that because it's a package that I've imported. So I can say import InputRange from input react input range. And also I'm just going to import its CSS with it. So I'm going to say import react input range / lub / css and / index dot css. So I'm importing the css for this as well, and I'm gonna override it in my custom css file in my index.css file. Sorry about that. So let's go ahead and say function component export, or let's say react function component export. And if I do that, it's gonna create a react component for me with an export of the name of the file that I have named it. Cool, right? That's why I like Visual Studio Code. Not selling it to you, keep using your own editor that you like, but yeah, this is my editor that I like. So let's quickly knock out some stuff over here. So I'm gonna remove this div as I'm not going to use it. I'm just gonna go ahead and use that input range that we just imported right there on top. I'm gonna go to a new line. It's a self-closing component, and this guy takes in a couple of params. So we're gonna use the min value. So min value is the minimum value that they can select. Just gonna set this to 20. The same goes with the max value. It's the maximum value that they can select with the slider. I'm gonna set that to 60. And the current value of the slider. So the current value of the slider, I'm gonna pass through as a param to this, because that needs to come from my app.js as we have set it here by default price. So we need to pass this through to this component and use it in here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and call this current price, and then we have an onChange function over here. So I can go ahead and say onChange, run this function for me, which is going to be the current value. So I can remove those and say take the current value, and I need to go ahead and update this price with the current value. So what this onChange does is that if it slides, it's going to increase this price. So I want to say, okay, take the 20 that I've passed through here as the value, take that 20 as the current value, and update the price to what it has been set right now. So I'm going to need to pass through this set price function as well and call it over here. So over here, I'm just going to call this function update price, as I'm going to pass it through as param, and I'm going to pass through the current value. So it's going to update it to the current value. So let's have a look at what I've done. So inside my input range, as I've said, I'm going to have some couple of params of props to this function component. Sorry, going to have some props to this component. So I'm just destructuring this out of that. So I can say current price. Let's do current price. Let's do update main price. And also I'm going to have reset yearly. So you guys, this will make sense right in a minute. And let's go ahead and create that function. So I'm going to say const. So the function I'm creating is actually this one, update price, as I'm not going to go call I'm not going to call the set price function directly inside of this onChange, but I'm going to call it inside a custom function that I'm creating over here. So I can say const update price, it's equal to updated price, and that's going to be an arrow function. So this updated price is whatever is being passed through to it over here, and I'm going to say update main price with this updated price. I'm passing that through over there, and I'm going to say reset yearly to false. Okay, so where this comes in is that if you have ticked this box to opt in for yearly billing and you slide it again, automatically it must reset it back to monthly, because the slider only works with monthly values. So if you slide it, if you make the price less, we must change everything back to monthly, including the price, including the label, and also that toggle button over here must also go back to monthly. So that's why we're resetting back to false over here. So I'm just going to save that and go back to my app file over here, and I'm going to import that input range right here in my comment section. So I can go ahead and delete that and say input range and hit enter. So it imported it as we see, input range from components, input range, and let's pass through those params. Am I calling it correctly? Why do I keep calling it params? Those props. Sorry, I'm thinking of functions. So we have a property called current price, which is going to take in the price, which is this current price over here. And we had a second one which was called update main price, which is going to be a function, which is going to be the set price. And then we also had reset yearly, which is also going to be set yearly function. And I think we have everything. The only thing I need to do now, just close it, Control B, so we have more space to work with. So close it. So it's input range, current price. If we look at the current price, it will be our current price is what we set the value to be. So this should be 20 automatically. And I also set that to be the minimum value. I can actually set this minimum value to be the same as that. It doesn't make a real difference. We have an update main price, which is a function that sets the current price, and we have a reset yearly function which just resets this to false if it was true. Let's save it, and we have a error. Let's see what's our error. Failed to compile input range. So let's change this to input range slider and also change it there. Save it. So over here, input range slider, save, change it there and save. There we go. No. All right, so as you guys can see, we currently have that slider. Is it working? Yes, it is. Or it's not sliding. Okay, maybe let's just change this. I think this could be my error. That was my error, my minimum value. It's giving me an error because my minimum value is actually my current price, and as I drag it, it updates, so my minimum value also updated. Yeah, not so smart from my part, but as you guys can see, it works. So as you slide it, it updates that price over there. And now the only thing that we need to do is actually add this toggle functionality right here at the bottom to say, are you opting in for a yearly or a monthly billing? And if you're opting in for a yearly billing, let's take whatever amount you've selected and make sure we give you a 25% discount. And how we're going to do that, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the look and feel for this. In order for us to get that toggle over there, you guys can Google. Inside of my components directory, I'm just going to create a file. I'm going to call it ToggleSwitch Mr. I.js. And also this guy comes with his own CSS file that I'm just going to put in there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say new file. This is going to be ToggleSwitch.css. I have those two files over there. Just going to close them quickly. Back to my input range, close my sidebar, close my sidebar, and I'm going to pause the video, copy those, paste it in there, and let's get back to this tutorial. Okay, so we're back from our pause. I think, guys, the best thing for me to do is actually, I've just pasted the toggle.css file over there that I'm not gonna go through. You guys can look at this file. It's straightforward CSS that he's using, but I think it would be unfair for you guys for me to also go ahead and just paste the JavaScript and expect you guys to understand what is happening with this file. So let's go ahead and work with this file. So the first thing I'm going to do is just do an import React from Sorry, that's supposed to be React. Okay, seems like I can't spell React. Let's just try this again. So I'm gonna say import React from React and close my sidebar so we have more space to work with. And I'm gonna import that CSS file you guys also just saw. So I'm gonna say import that CSS file, which is fine. And we're gonna create const. This is ToggleSwitch, which is going to be our arrow function. It's equal to a arrow function. So this ToggleSwitch is actually going to be our main component function. And in here, let's just structure a couple of stuff that we're going to pass through. First one is going to be the ID. Second one is going to be checked, which is going to be a boolean and an onChange event. So we're going to have onChange, and we're going to have option labels. Okay, so inside of this function, let's add our default return statement. And inside of this return, let's create a div. And we're going to add class name to this div. And we're not going to use Tailwind CSS for this one, as we're using the classes provided. I am going to link into the description. Sorry, I'm going to link in the description the link where I've actually got this code from, so you guys can go ahead and give this guy some stars in his GitHub profile. I think he will appreciate that. So let's do that. Always nice to help out other developers. So I'm going to say it's going to be an input of type checkbox. And I'm going to give it a class name, and this class name is going to be ToggleSwitch checkbox, and it's going to have an ID, and the ID is going to be whatever ID is being passed through in my props on top. And I'm going to say is it checked, which is going to be a boolean. So checked is going to be equal to check that has been passed through on top. Let me just do a self-closing tag so we can take care of those curly little error lines we see there. And we're going to add an onChange event to this. So I'm going to say onChange e for the current event, and I'm going to call that function that I've passed through as a param. Just going to pass through the e for current event dot target dot checked. Okay, and let's go ahead and add a label to this. So a label, it's going to have a class, and this class name is going to be toggle-switch label, and I'm going to say HTML4 ID, which is this ID that's been passed through on top. And inside of this label, let me add my span tags. So I'm going to have a span tag, which is actually just going to be self-closing span tags. And this span is going to have a class name. I'm going to call this toggle-switch inner, and it's going to have a data yes attribute is equal to optional, that option labels at position 0, as we'll see right now where that comes in. And you're going to have a data no, going to be the same thing, option label at position 1. So let me go ahead and just put this guys in their own line so that we have more space to work with. And let's have a tab index, of -1. Let's do a second span. It's also going to be a self-closing, and this one is just going to have the class name, which is going to be toggle dash class name toggle dash switch and this guy's also going to have a tab index of -1. Okay, so the only thing now we still need to do is just add right here at the bottom. We're gonna call ToggleSwitch.default props. So we're gonna have to go import those default props as we're setting them here, which is gonna be option labels, and that's gonna be an array. You guys might have guessed that, but the position 0 and position 1, that just needed to be an array. So this is gonna be an array with just an option of yes and an option of no. And finally, let's do an export default toggle switch. I think we have it. Save it. Now we need to import this in our app.js, and I've said that would go right here where we currently have this input. We'll say toggle switch from component, hit enter, hit import it. Let's do a self-closing tag, and let's pass through the variables that we need to pass through to that one. And the variables that we need to pass through obviously is the ID. So I'm just gonna give it an ID of yearly. Is it checked? So my checked is also going to be yearly, which is going to be false. And I'm going to say on change, I'm going to pass through a function called set yearly. So what this on change actually is going to do, if you quickly check the toggle switch, is this over here. So it's going to check that. So this is just going to return a boolean. Is target checked? It's either going to be true or false. As you guys can see, check is actually a boolean, which either will be true or false, and we are setting that to say we set the yearly either to true or false by whatever's been returned inside of this on change event right here. So we are updating this true or false over here, and if we save this, and have we broken our application? Doesn't seem like it. We have our toggle button. If I click this, you guys see it, yearly automatically changed, and if we change it back, we have this nice toggle effect going on right here, which is nice. So the only thing we need to do now is actually to say, if I've selected $38 per month, I need to get 25% discount if I opt in for a yearly package. So you guys need to go ahead and say, take this to 38, or even take this 32, times it with 12, and then give me a 25% discount. Now I can do it for you guys inside here in my app.js, but what I'm going to do in this one, because I want you guys to actually practice coding, and that will make a better developer out of you, I'm just gonna go and create you the function, which I'm gonna call update price, and I want you guys to go full in this function with me with the logic that you think will be best suited for us to go ahead and give them their 25% discount if they opt in for a yearly billing. You guys need to keep the following in mind, is that if the client is opting for yearly billing, we must show him the correct price, would be the amount of month times the amount and then minus the 25% discount. But if you opt specs out for a monthly billing, we need to go ahead and change the amount back to the amount that he has selected. So that's something to keep in mind while you are coding this update price function, and then use that update price function whenever this value changes. So just a hint for you guys, If we were doing React in the old days, we would use component did mount or component will mount. But because now we're using the new type of React with hooks, so what we can use is the following hook. So we can use the use effect hook to do the following. So what we want is to say, I can go ahead and say call this function when yearly updates. Okay, so you need to do two things in my use effect. You need to call this function whenever this value updates. If you guys not sure how to use effect in order to do that, hit me up in the comments. But I do encourage you guys to first try it out, see if you can do it on your own. If you're really struggling, hit me up in the comments. I'll go ahead and do my bit to assist you in how you guys can achieve this. If you want to see the full code as where I've added this as well, you guys gonna need to DM me in my inbox right below, and then I will go ahead and send you to the file where I actually have this function for you guys to go ahead and take a look. And as I've said, guys, if you like this type of content, if you like this type of videos, let me know by hitting that like button. Me and the YouTube algorithm likes that. If you haven't done so, make this the video where you subscribe to my channel, as I'll try my best to assist you into becoming the best developer that you're inspired to be. As I always say, till next time, guys, stay safe.